It's nice to be back. I was here, I believe it was in October, to spend a few minutes talking about TCOIC. And this morning I'd like to take the few minutes to discuss the experiences that TCOIC has had with the religious community in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Now, once again, let me say that TCOIC is a tax-exempt, nonprofit corporation. It is a local organization patterned after the original OIC founded in Philadelphia by Reverend Leon Sullivan 4 years ago. It is one of 65 OICs either in existence or being formed throughout the country. And it started about a year and a half ago in Minneapolis, St. Paul. It didn't actually begin training until a year ago, January, this last January. And we have now grown from a staff of about 5 people and about 75 trainees in the space of just a little over a year to a staff of 180 people in 3 very large, well-equipped branch centers, 2 in Minneapolis, 1 in St. Paul. And we've registered well over 1,000 people, placed 344 on meaningful jobs. And but the ties to the religious community for TCOIC are very, very great. As a matter of fact, it was the Minneapolis Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance who first brought the idea of OIC to Minneapolis, St. Paul and sponsored the original steering committee and the original small staff to try to organize a local OIC program to provide free pre-vocational and vocational training to disadvantaged people of every kind. The only requirements whatsoever to enroll and take the training at TCOIC is to be 17 years of age or older. Otherwise, there are no requirements. And it's been a remarkable experience. The Ministerial Alliance, of course, provided the impetus to bring this program here and to get it going. One of the first things that happened was a fund drive that was conducted by the Minnesota Council on Religion and Race. It took about $8,000 to put on this fund drive, and $6,000 was raised. This is about our only really negative experience with the religious community, in that the response, as you can obviously see, was very poor. I think they were after something like $100,000. And they ended up with 6. There were a number of ministers who said that their congregations weren't ready for contributing funds by buying buttons for $1 a piece. They were selling TCOIC buttons for $1. And they wanted to sell these, of course, in the churches. And the church would conduct the sale to raise money. And there were about a half a dozen ministers who did openly indicate that their churches were not ready. Now, what that means, I don't think I have to explain to anyone here. It's too bad when any churchman or any church would feel that they aren't ready to support the kind of work that TCOIC was trying to do, which was to give people an opportunity to earn a living and take care of themselves and their family the way that most of us are able to do, and rather take for granted. Because these opportunities have always been available to most of us and to our parents. This is not so for a great many of our people. And so the original fund drive was not successful. The religious community was very slow getting up out of their pews and doing something out in the community to alleviate the social and the economic ills of our community. I'm sure you've many times, and perhaps most of you have said yourself, that it's necessary for the church and for church people to take a role of being activists and doing something original, imaginative, and dynamic so that the church can respond in that kind of a manner to the problems that confront us. This is a relatively new approach to our social problems on the part of the church. It wasn't very long ago that this was almost, this was heresy almost. It just wasn't done. And, but today things are changing, and now the church and church people are becoming very, very active, and in most instances doing a tremendous job in getting out into the community, getting out where the action is, doing the work of the Lord out where the Lord's people are. And most of those who most need the kind of help that Christ addressed himself to when he worked with the people, which is what he did most of the time, were not to be found in the temple. They were to be found out in the street, and they were most likely never to be found in the temple, for that matter. And so finally we were starting to be a little bit realistic about the role of the church in society. And I think we're getting a little bit closer to what Christ had in mind all along when it comes to the social and the economic problems of society. Well, nevertheless, things improved. The Minnesota Council on Religion and Race did draw together many, many church people from all over the Twin Cities to a meeting, to a banquet, which has resulted in considerably more funds for TCOIC. $1,800 was contributed by the Catholic Interracial Council in May. A fund drive was launched in St. Paul of many area churches that raised a good deal of money. Our Operation Green Tape, which is mostly made possible by churches, provides food, clothing, and money to trainees who are simply unable to provide the necessities of life for themselves. And we can hardly expect anyone to take training, go to school, study, and so forth, if they don't have food to put on the table, clothes to put on their back, money to ride the bus. And this is very often the case. We've found many families of 6, 7, 8 people. And we found out that the reason they weren't attending classes is because they didn't have anything to eat, or they didn't have what does it cost to ride the bus? They didn't have the money to ride the bus, or they didn't have decent clothing. They wouldn't have, go out public to any degree. And so something had to be done. So Operation Green Tape was organized, and this is made possible mostly by church women, about 1,000 of them in the Twin Cities, who donate groceries and have donated money to buy clothing, new clothing, at clothing stores that sell them to us at cost, and to provide a slush fund of money for people for bus fare and things of this nature. And Aldersgate Methodist Church and Prince of Peace Lutheran Church in St. Louis Park have been particularly active in this regard, and have raised many thousands of dollars for Operation Green Tape. Many other churches have participated in Operation Green Tape throughout the Twin Cities. We tried Operation ZAP here a while ago. ZAP was nothing more, we call it ZAP because we couldn't think of a name for it. Somebody said, well, let's go out there and zap these people. And we said, that's it, we'll call it ZAP. And it doesn't make any sense at all. But what does make sense is that we tried to bring Negroes and whites together. By the way, TCOIC is not a Negro program. Many people think it is. It isn't. However, I would say our enrollment is about 65% Negro, but we're completely integrated, board of directors, staff, trainees, everything else. And we don't think in terms of Negro, white, or Indian, or Spanish American, but 'cause that's the way it is. But we think in terms of people, as I'm sure most of you do. And so we invited about 250 church people to come down to Central Lutheran Church in December 14th, to meet with 250 Negro people for the purpose of just sitting down and getting acquainted, because we knew that many of these white people from the suburbs, didn't even know any Negro people, had no contact with Negroes. And when you have no contact with people and you're really very ignorant about them, all you know is what you read in maybe the headlines of the paper or something like that, the inflammatory junk that you see on TV, which constitutes only 1% perhaps of their collective lives. We had a rather embarrassing experience. We had 250 white people from the suburbs, all right, but only 10 Negroes showed up. And there are reasons for this. And most of them felt, why? What's the use? What's to come of it? We've done this before. It doesn't do any good. It's hypocritical. And that was one of the reasons. And what do you say? They're largely right. But that doesn't mean that you don't keep trying. So we're trying it again, December 27th, February 27th, this month, at St. Peter's AME in South Minneapolis, at a Negro church. And we're going to get the white people suburbs to come there. And I hope the Negro congregation shows up, because if they don't, why, then I'm afraid ZAP is doomed forever. But ZAP is just another way to provide a dialogue. It's not much of an answer to anything, but it's just another means, another vehicle to start and provide a dialogue, and maybe some meaningful new relationships to people who need these kind of meaningful relationships. Hennepin Avenue Methodist Church just gave us $12,000. That's the largest sum that we have ever received from a single church, and it's a lot of money to get from one church, and we were very happy to receive it. And this is, again, illustrative of the much greater support that we're beginning to receive from churches, financial support, but of course we want a good deal more than that. We want people to get involved with our organization and other organizations, and to get involved in the programs and the organizations and in the work that people do, and that many of you have already, I know, do or have done or are going to be doing, to help try to correct some of the problems that we face here in the Twin Cities and in America. And I'm convinced that we have gone through a cycle. We went through a kind of a moral awakening when that lady down in Montgomery, Alabama, refused to ride in the back of the bus. Martin Luther King and the bus strike was organized, and we went through a moral awakening, and this was a wonderful thing for America. But then the time came when something more substantive, something definite, like job training and housing and these things, became more important than any moral awakening. And we went through this period, and it was a tough period, and this is when there was the rioting and all these things, is because people were suddenly made to believe that the new opportunities had arrived. They were here today as a result of this moral reawakening, only we know that we were behind. We weren't ready yet to really provide sincerely those opportunities that they seem to be promised. And so we had a lot of trouble. Nobody should have any difficulty understanding why we had that trouble. And I believe now we should be starting another cycle of another moral reawakening. Because the fact is that the people who are concerned and who understand and who take the trouble to be concerned and to understand these problems represent a relative minority of the American people. And I think we have to do something about that. I don't think we're going to make any real progress in this country, really great progress, until the majority of the people understand what these problems are and this business of the relationships between the races and so on and so forth. The majority of the people must understand these things and do something and work to make the situation better. And in order to accomplish this, there's only one way this is ever going to happen. And this is when the present minority of white people in this country who are concerned, who take an interest, make it their business to see to it that the rest of the white community in this nation gets with it. Because we had better get with it, and we'd better get with it quick, or we're in for real trouble, because we haven't had any race riots in this country for many, many years. Now, we've had a revolution going on, the brick throwing and the burning and all that, but this has all taken place in the ghettos. Negroes have never attacked white people in the suburbs or in the white community, and the white people have never attacked Negroes in the Negro communities. And if that ever happens, it'll be the worst thing that ever happened in the history of this country. This country could blow sky high if that ever happens. And it could happen. It could happen unless the white community gets with it. And And those of us who are concerned have got to see to it that our friends and neighbors start to face and look realistically at this whole broad range of problems, instead of carrying around this endless grab bag of cliches and stereotype thinking that have been dragging behind them for all these years. And I feel that church people, they have the organization, and the opportunity, the mechanism, the bodies, and the commitment, the moral, the ethical, the religious commitment to get this job done. And I think that this is one of the most meaningful tasks confronting the religious community, is to assume the mantle of leadership in providing a broad moral reawakening and reappraisal on the part of most of white America. To get involved, to be concerned, and to understand. Thank you very much.